Anastasia here. Welcome to my corner of the internet, advice for young pros. Really glad to have you here. I have been thinking about how I want to tackle this project. So I've been working on this project, Advice for Young Pros, for many years now. Like I think since 2000. Oh shoot, maybe like 2013, maybe. It started out as a blog, still is a blog. The blog still exists. I don't write in it at the moment. I haven't written in it in a while, but the intent of Advice for Young Pros was for me to kind of take everything that I learned in my career to date and then share it out with as many people that are open to listening. Not because I'm trying to be an influencer. I don't know. I don't know that that's the goal here. As much as it is, I went to school to be a teacher. I've always loved teaching. I never got the chance to do it. But part of being a teacher, in my opinion, is also being an avid learner. And over these next episodes, I guess you would call it, I'll share more about my background. But the journey to get to where I am today is a long journey full of many experiences and stories and learns. And in the same way that I benefited from those, I wanted to share it with others as well. So, what is Advice for Young Pros? Advice for Young Pros is the corner of the internet where I hope I can reach any young professional. And young doesn't have to mean age, okay? So, maybe you're starting a new career, maybe you just became a manager, maybe you are just, starting a career period. Young is not related to age, it's more young in the career that you're in or the role that you're in. And my goal and my hope is that I can share these different lessons and different stories with people, and that you can take from it what you will and then apply it to improve, your career and your life and all of those things. I have just been so blessed to work with and talk to and meet incredibly smart, capable, talented individuals. And I have just gotten such a tremendous opportunity to learn, not just from what they're doing well, but from, maybe mistakes that they've made, certainly mistakes that I've made, and things that I've done well too. And the goal is just to share that. And that I hope we can create and engage in discourse and create this community of sharing and learning and growing together. And that, I envision a world where there's like a group of us, Advice for Young Pros out there, that are just continuing to exchange in learns and like supporting each other, and that this is a space where we're all committed to minimizing that equity gap in knowledge, connections, access to careers and opportunities, and just the things that would make you be really effective at what you do. So that's me, that's this corner, that's kind of my goal. In terms of like my background, I've been in corporate America for over 10 plus years. I've played largely in ed tech companies, from really, really small startups like pre seed. We just got a couple million to really, really large corporations that are worth $1 billion or $2 billion, right? And I'm like a director of a sub a portion of that. So I've had the wonderful privilege to play a variety of roles, and I think that's kind of where I'm from and where I'm at, and the journey to get there and the learns that I've had to kind of take on and the things that I've observed, and again just the tremendous amount of people that I've met that are so talented and so kind with their wisdom and knowledge. That's kind of what I want to share here. And I'm hoping I can do this once a week. I don't know. I stink at this because it's intimidating, right? Like I've been thinking about recording this episode and like what I want to talk about for the last, I don't know, like month or two. And it can be really intimidating just being in the space. And I need to be better about not being intimidated. So that's what this is. That's what this first episode is. Just not being intimidated and being open to maybe, like maybe just being open to this being imperfect and letting it go, and who cares. Okay, so I talked about myself, I talked about advice for young pros and the goal. And now I want to talk about the topic at hand that I wanted to share. And the topic that I wanted to talk about tonight is around, mm, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. I want to talk about what I saw the other day, where somebody was essentially talking about feeling like unsure. Well, I'll just call it imposter syndrome. I had a friend actually reach out um, and vulnerability and share that they were really struggling with imposter syndrome and feeling like they're not a right fit for the role that they're in, and maybe they're in the wrong industry. And I'm going to call this person Alex. Alex, yes. So Alex calls me and they tell me that, yeah, I'm really struggling. I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like, am I in the right role here? I feel like my colleagues aren't, and I are so different and they're kind of on a different wavelength than I am. And Alex is a very accomplished professional. Okay. Alex, just like me, started out, at an early talent position, like the entry level position, and Alex worked their way up all the way to like senior director of a multi-million dollar organization, where Alex leads, the essentially like a partnership uh account manager type role. And so I listened to Alex, and they were sharing a lot of, like the just some of the feelings that they had of, why they don't feel like maybe they're, you know, the on par, because they just had a presentation, and as part of this presentation they were asked some questions by the leader of the organization, and you know, Alex, um I, in my opinion, did a fantastic job of addressing, but you're not gonna be able to anticipate every single question, right? And so they were kind of really reeling from that. And imposter syndrome, I mean, as I define it, right, it's this feeling of, it's you're not like supposed to be there, right? Like you're kind of, mm, y- you're not good enough. You're faking it, so to speak. By the way, everybody fakes it, okay? Part of whatever role you're in is faking it till you make it. So but that's to me is imposter syndrome. It's feeling like you're not good enough. And Alex, I can understand why they might feel that way, because for whatever reason, when you're going through something, especially when it's something that you care about a lot, or especially, even at work, you tend to focus on the things that didn't go well. Actually, you know what? That's probably life too. And that, I think, is indicative of, I don't know, like human nature, right? Like, if you maybe imposter syndrome tells you this lie that you're not good enough, and so confirmation bias uh makes it so that way you look for all those instances to validate that you're not good enough. Which is why I think, when it comes to combating imposter syndrome, really the best way to do it is self-awareness. It's telling yourself the narrative that's true and helpful, right? So one of the ways, I had a fantastic manager at one point that essentially told me, whenever you have intrusive thoughts, ask yourself two questions. Is it true? And if the answer is no, then let it go. But let's say the answer is yes, then ask yourself the second question. Is it helpful? And if the answer is no, then let it go and move forward from it, right? Doesn't mean that you don't learn from it, doesn't mean that you're not trying to get better. You should absolutely do those things. But that's how you kind of keep imposter syndrome in check, is have the self-awareness to, one, ask yourself, is it true? Is it true that just because I couldn't answer a couple questions, then I'm not a good leader or a good director? No. But let's say that was true, because there were questions that maybe you should have been able to answer, let's just say. Is that a helpful thought? You're already a director. Is that helpful to you? If the answer is no, no, okay, then let it go. What is going to be the helpful thought? How are you going to overcome, imposter syndrome in how are you going to overcome the position that you find yourself in so that way you can continue to advance. And if you saw me doing that, because it's my computer froze, so I had to log back in. Anyway, but the show must go on, darling. So I was still filming. Okay, so imposter syndrome, to go back. As I said, so I was talking to my friend, listening to them, and yeah, I asked, I really, I help them kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and say, let's really think about this. What is the role that you're there to do? Let's talk about the actual skills that the role that you're there to do is supposed to have, right? You're supposed to be able to be good at talking to people. You're supposed to be good at, keeping projects going. You're supposed to be good at cross-functional, really leading cross-functional initiatives and cross-functional collaboration. There is an aspect of it that's salesy. Okay, let's park it over there. But to an extent, to me, being a good salesperson is just believing in your product and getting everybody to buy into the same thing, right? Getting everybody excited about that. And there's a level of psychological, you know, mind games that you have to play. But if you believe in your product and you can convey that authentically, people typically buy into that. And yeah, like, okay, so obviously you have to know your numbers. That's a big part of it. But my friend knew their numbers, so that's not a problem. And yeah, like, it's being able to look around. As I've said, if you're a new client manager, one of the best skills you can develop is the ability to look around every single corner. That was one of the things that I learned. Anyway, and we can talk about partner success, client management stuff later. This is all to say, um, this friend of mine, that's what they shared with me. And yeah, like, I help them really peel back the layer, think about what are the skills, and then how do you actually measure against those skills, and developing the self-awareness and rewriting that narrative, right? And so that's what we did. We spent the call doing that. At the end of it, I said, okay, so based off of this, it sounds like you check off every single one of those boxes. You can see my fan in the back, sorry. So are you a fit for this role? And my friend said, yeah, I am. I am a fit. It's very easy, I think, in moments when you feel like you didn't do well, to focus on that one thing that you didn't do well, and somehow that one thing invalidates everything else that you've done well, which is not true. So then after we did that exercise of self-awareness, we then, and rationality and objectivity, we then went back to the, is this helpful? Is this true? So I said, now that you know that you are these things, one, you said that because you weren't able to kind of address some of these questions effectively in the room. Um, and so now maybe, you're not a good fit. One, is that true? And I think we can definitively say the answer is no. So we said no. And then two, even if it was true, is it helpful? No. What is helpful? And so then we talked about what would be helpful for her to address in that moment, right? Like, what would be helpful for them to address. And so Alex and I, we came to the conclusion that, hey, this is what's true. This is what's helpful. What's helpful is then to think about in the future, how do you deal with, when you're asked a question that you just couldn't have anticipated? What's the best way to deal with it in a way that's honest, respectful, but also shows that you're taking initiative and action, right? And so, we talked about how saying, you know what, that's a really good question. I have the numbers for that. I will get back to you in the next meeting. I'll follow up with you on that, with numbers on that and the reasoning after this, because I prepared for this portion, but I need to follow up on that more. I need to look into that more. Now, you don't want to pull that I'm going to look into that card a lot. You really should only be pulling that every once in a while. Case in point, my first meeting with like a bunch of executives, somebody asked me that question. I said, you know what, that's a good question. Let me look into it and I'll get back to you. Um, my boss literally after, be mindful, I'd only been working for this company for a month. That's how great my boss was. Says to me, you really shouldn't use that answer all the time. And I was like, I know. Like, what do you think? It's kind of rookie? Get out of here. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I said, yep, you're right. And so, because that's what you got to do. You got to say, yep, you're right, and learn from it and move forward, right? That's what I said to them. Next time, you know that this is a key question, learn from it and move forward. Learn from it and move forward. And so, yeah, we were able to walk away from that. And I asked them if they felt like, okay, do you feel good? Do you feel like you've been able to keep that imposter syndrome at bay? And they said yes. Alex said yes. So I was really happy. And I really also need to take my own advice whenever I'm feeling the same way, because I definitely suffered from imposter syndrome many times in my life. To this day, probably moments where I do. So especially if I have to do mental math, because that is not my strength. So yeah, so that's just a quick share on imposter syndrome, some of the learns. Now, for at the end of this, I kind of want to just give out some random advice, like one random piece of advice. It's not related to like anything work or corporate or advice for young pros. So, here's my random piece of advice for you coming um out of this session. My random piece of advice is focus on your health. Totally not related to what I was talking about before, but super important. I recently had like a physical done, and I found out that okay, maybe eating dessert all the time is not a good idea. So I have learned that I now need to be super mindful about the sugar that I put in my body, and I have to adjust. So don't be in that position. Be mindful of what you eat for sure, and don't eat too much dessert, and make sure that health is your focus. I had a friend visit me from California, and she's very self-conscious, or rather health conscious, not self-conscious, health conscious. And she said, and I asked her like, why is that? Because I think she's vegan. And she said, well, because you can have a lot of problems, but when health is your problem, then you only have one problem. So that's my random piece of advice, maybe not so random. Make sure that you continue to focus on your health. It's super important. So, hi, thank you so much again for joining. Anastasia here. I'm going to sign off. Hopefully, you'll see a video from me next week. And welcome to my corner of the internet, this Advice for Young Pros corner. Thank you.